The sun had just begun to peek through the thin curtains of a small, modest apartment in Brookdale. The sound of a sharp, repetitive beep echoed through the dimly lit room. Mia Evans groaned, her hand fumbling to silence the alarm clock on the bedside table. Her eyes blinked open slowly, adjusting to the faint light. Another day had begun. With a tired sigh, Mia sat up on the edge of her bed, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her gaze drifted toward the doorway, where the soft clinking of dishes signaled her mother's presence in the kitchen. Barefoot, Mia patted her way down the short hall and into the kitchen. Her mother, Nora Evans, stood by the counter, her posture slightly hunched. Dressed in a simple work uniform, Nora's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She carefully spread peanut butter onto 2 slices of bread. Her gaze lifted as Mia approached, and she managed a weary but loving smile. "Morning, sweetheart," Nora said, her voice gentle but worn. "Morning, Mom," Mia replied, her tone soft but steady. She sat at the small round kitchen table, watching her mother with quiet concern. "Got another long shift today?" Mia asked, already knowing the answer. "Double shift, actually." Nora sighed as she folded the sandwich in wax paper and placed it into a paper bag. "But I'll be home by 9. Don't wait up, okay?" Mia nodded, biting her lip. Her eyes followed Nora's every movement, the way her mother's hands trembled slightly as she packed the bag, the tired slump of her shoulders. She wanted to say something, to tell her to rest, but she knew her mother wouldn't listen. Nora had always been like that, strong, stubborn, and willing to do anything for her daughter. "Here," Nora said, placing the paper bag in front of Mia with a small smile. "Don't forget it this time." "I won't," Mia promised, grabbing the bag. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was time to leave. Before heading to the door, she turned back. "Take care of yourself, Mom." "You too, baby," Nora replied, her smile a little sad but full of love. Mia made her way down the apartment stairs, stepping into the lively streets of Brookdale. Cars honked, people chatted, and the world moved at its usual fast pace. She walked with her head down, the paper bag clutched tightly in her hand. As she turned a corner, a soft melody floated through the air. Her eyes lifted, and she spotted him, the street musician, an old man with silver hair and a beard that framed his weathered face. His clothes were worn, his coat patched in places, but his fingers danced across the guitar strings with grace. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful as if lost in his own world. The tune he played was slow, melancholic, but beautiful. Mia lingered for a moment, watching him. Her feet hesitated, and something about him stuck with her. She didn't know why. With a small shake of her head, she continued on her way to school, but the soft melody stayed with her long after she'd walked out of earshot. Mia trudged through the crowded halls of Brookdale High, her eyes focused on the ground. She knew what was coming. "Look who it is," a familiar voice called out. "It's Little Miss Nobody." Mia clenched her jaw but didn't look up. Zoe Parker leaned against a locker, her arms folded and her smirk sharp as ever. Her group of friends stood behind her, giggling like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. "Did you finally get some new shoes, Mia?" Zoe sneered, glancing at Mia's scuffed sneakers. "Oh, wait. Nope. Same old ones." Her friends snickered, their laughter like needles pricking Mia's skin. She felt a hot rush of anger, but forced herself to stay calm. She'd learned that reacting only made them push harder. So she walked past them without a word, gripping her paper bag tighter. Lunch arrived, and Mia sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria. She unwrapped her sandwich, her eyes drifting to the soft swirl of peanut butter and jelly. She stared at it for a while, her thoughts distant. The melody from that old man's guitar still echoed in her mind. She wondered if he'd had anything to eat today. Her gaze flickered to Zoe and her group, laughing loudly at the center table. For a moment, doubt crept in. Would they laugh at her again today? She glanced back at the sandwich. After school, Mia's path home took her past the same street corner. The soft strumming of the guitar reached her ears, and there he was, the old man, playing that same gentle tune. He didn't seem to notice her approach. Mia stopped. Her heart thudded in her chest as she stared at him. Her fingers brushed the paper bag in her hand. Slowly, she walked toward him, her breath shallow. Hi, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stopped playing and looked up. His eyes were a warm, gentle brown, and they softened the moment he saw her. "Hello, young lady," he said with a smile. Beautiful day, isn't it? Yeah, I guess, she murmured. Her eyes darted to the sandwich in her hand. Her heart pounded as if she were about to do something risky. Without giving herself time to second guess, she reached out. Here, she said quickly, holding the sandwich out to him. It's for you. The man blinked, stunned. His eyes shifted from the sandwich to Mia's face. His hands moved slowly as he accepted it, his fingers careful, as if he didn't believe it was real. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to me. Mia felt warmth spread through her chest. Her heart stopped racing, and for the first time that day, she smiled. The following morning at Brookdale High, whispers followed Mia like shadows. Did you see her? One girl whispered. She gave food to that street guy. I heard she's friends with him, another boy snickered. Maybe he's her uncle or something. When Mia walked into the hallway, the whispers stopped for half a second, only to be replaced by laughter. She kept her head down, her hands in her hoodie pockets. Hey, Mia, Zoe called from across the hall, her voice syrupy sweet. How's your new best friend? Did he share his mansion with you yet? Her friends burst into laughter, slapping each other on the back, like Zoe had just told the greatest joke in the world. Mia's cheeks burned, but she didn't stop walking. Her heart pounded, but she remembered how Eli's eyes had softened when she handed him that sandwich. She remembered how warm it had felt. Class felt like it dragged on forever. When the bell finally rang, she packed up her books slowly, went out waiting for the others to leave first, but someone was waiting for her. Miss Evans, Mr. Collins's voice called from the front of the classroom. Mia paused, glancing at her math teacher. He was straightening his tie, the fabric worn from use. His eyes, however, were sharp and kind. You seem a little distracted today, he said, his tone light but sincere. Everything okay? Maya hesitated but nodded. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. He hummed, crossing his arms. You know, kindness doesn't always get applause, but it's never wasted. Her gaze shot up to meet his, her eyes wide with surprise. He smiled. You never know who's watching, Mia. The weight on her chest lifted, just a little. She left the classroom feeling lighter than she had in days. As she walked home, she hummed a soft melody. It was slow, quiet, and peaceful. She didn't realize it was the same tune Eli had played. Sometimes, the world notices when it sees something rare. Morning light spilled into the small kitchen of the Evans apartment. The faint aroma of coffee lingered in the air. Mia sat at the table, scribbling in her notebook. Across from her, Nora poured coffee into a plain white mug, her eyes half open from the exhaustion of another double shift. Did you finish your math homework? Nora asked, stifling a yawn. Almost, Mia replied, chewing on the end of her pencil. She hesitated for a moment, then glanced up. Mom, do you think being kind really matters if nobody sees it? Nora raised an eyebrow, turning to face her daughter. Kindness isn't something you do to be seen, honey. You do it because it's right. She smiled gently, taking a sip of her coffee. Why do you ask? Mia shrugged, her eyes fixed on her notebook. No reason. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the low rumble of an engine outside. It wasn't the usual hum of passing cars or delivery trucks. This sound was deeper, smoother. Both Mia and Nora glanced toward the window. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb directly in front of their building. Its glossy exterior shimmered in the sunlight, like a mirror. Is that a limo? Mia asked, leaning forward to get a better look. Nora frowned, setting her coffee cup down. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. I don't like this, she muttered, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. They watched as the back door of the limousine opened. Out stepped a man in a tailored gray suit, sharp and flawless like it had never seen a wrinkle. His shoes shone like polished glass. He glanced up at the building, adjusted the cuffs of his jacket, and walked toward their door with purpose. Nora's eyes darted to Mia. Stay here, she said, her voice low but firm. A knock echoed through the apartment. 3 sharp, deliberate taps. Nora approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. The man stood there, hands clasped neatly in front of him, his posture calm and controlled. Who is it? Nora asked, not opening the door. Good morning, Mrs. Evans, the man said smoothly, his voice polite but authoritative. My name is Anthony Reed. I'm here on behalf of a philanthropic initiative. May I have a moment of your time? Nora's fingers tightened on the doorknob. Her eyes flicked back to Mia, who watched from the kitchen, eyes wide with curiosity and worry. Philanthropic initiative? Nora repeated, her tone skeptical. We're not buying anything, and we're not signing anything. I understand, Anthony replied patiently. But I assure you, I'm not selling anything. I'm here because of your daughter. Nora's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes darted back to Mia. What did she do? Slowly, she unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. What do you want with my daughter? Anthony smiled, his eyes kind but sharp, like he already knew the answer. Sometimes the world takes notice when it sees something rare, he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. From the inner pocket of his jacket, he pulled out a crisp white envelope with a gold seal. He extended it to her. Please, just read it. I promise it will make sense. Nora hesitated, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of deception, but something about his calm confidence unsettled her. She took the envelope, but didn't open it. We'll be in touch, Anthony said, giving her a small nod. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel, walked back to the limousine, and stepped inside. The door shut with a quiet thud, and the sleek car pulled away from the curb like a shadow disappearing into the sunlit street. Nora stood there for a moment, staring at the envelope in her hand. Her fingers brushed the gold seal, and a chill ran down her spine. Mom? Mia's voice brought her back. Nora shut the door and locked it twice. It's nothing, she said, forcing a smile. Probably just some fancy advertising stunt. But as she placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, her eyes lingered on it, unable to look away. Mia's heart wouldn't stop racing as she sat at the back of the school library, surrounded by the soft hum of quiet conversations and the gentle rustle of turning pages. Her mind had been replaying Anthony Reed's words all day. Because of your daughter. But why? What did they want with her? The curiosity gnawed at her until she couldn't take it anymore. After school, instead of heading home, she slipped into the library. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed, Philanthropic Initiative Anthony Reed Brookdale. The search results filled the screen. Most of them seemed irrelevant, but one headline caught her eye. It was an old article from a business magazine dated 2 years ago. Eccentric millionaire Eli Grant launches unique kindness experiment. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Eli Grant? She clicked on the link. Her eyes scanned the text, her fingers tightening around her phone as each line revealed more. Reclusive millionaire Eli Grant, known for his unorthodox approach to philanthropy, has begun a social experiment to identify genuine acts of kindness. Disguised as an ordinary man on the streets, he seeks to reward those who show compassion without expecting anything in return. Her breath caught in her throat. The old man. The street musician. Her mind spun. No, it's not him. It can't be. But she couldn't deny it. The description fit him perfectly. His weathered face, his old coat, his eyes that had seen too much of the world. Her hands shook as she stared at her phone. So it was all a setup? She thought about the sandwich she had given him. Her heart, which had felt so warm that day, now felt hollow. Was it all a test? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. No, it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to trick people like that. Her fingers hovered over her phone as her mind buzzed with confusion, anger, and doubt. Did my kindness even matter if it was just part of someone else's plan? She shoved her phone into her backpack, her jaw tight with frustration. She walked home that day with heavy steps, her heart a storm of emotions. The street corner looked the same as it always did, crowded, noisy, and filled with people rushing to their next destination. But today, Mia wasn't walking past. She was walking straight toward him. The old man sat on a crate, his guitar resting on his lap, fingers plucking the same soft melody she'd heard before. This time, she didn't pause. She marched straight up to him, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Are you really just a street musician? She blurted, her voice sharp and filled with anger. The man's fingers stilled on the strings. He raised his head slowly, his brown eyes meeting hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a soft sigh, he set his guitar aside. No, he admitted, I'm not. Her heart sank. She had hoped he would deny it. She had hoped she was wrong. Then why? She demanded, her fists clenched. Why do all of this? Trick people? Play with them? I never lied to you, he said gently. I only played music. You were the one who stopped. You were the one who cared. His words hit her like a slap to the chest. Her breath hitched. But it wasn't real, she muttered, her voice shaking. I thought I was being kind because it was right. And you were, he said firmly, his eyes unwavering. That's the point, Mia. You didn't know anyone was watching, and you still did it. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but this time she didn't blink them away. She didn't know if she was crying from anger or relief. Maybe both. Then why me? She asked, her voice small. He smiled softly. Because sometimes the world needs proof that kindness still exists. Her tears finally fell, but she didn't wipe them away. She stood there, raw and exposed, letting the world see her for who she was. And in that moment, she realized something. Kindness isn't something you do to be seen. It's something you do because it's right. The Evans apartment was unusually quiet. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, each tick stretching longer than the last. Mia sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, while Nora stood at the kitchen counter, her hands resting on the unopened envelope from Anthony Reed. They had stared at it for what felt like hours. "Are you going to open it, Mom?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nora didn't answer right away. She ran her thumb over the gold seal, her eyes distant. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she peeled it open and pulled out the neatly folded papers inside. Her eyes scanned the top page, her brows furrowing deeper with each line she read. Her hands began to tremble. "What does it say?" Mia asked, sitting up straighter. Nora didn't respond right away. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She flipped to the next page, her eyes darting back and forth as she read. Then, with shaky hands, she set the papers down on the counter. "It's real," she said, her voice soft with disbelief. It's real." Mia stood up and approached the counter. "What's real?" Nora pointed to the paper, her voice unsteady. "They're offering us financial aid, enough to pay off rent for the year. They're offering me a chance to start my own business, some kind of small grant fund." Her voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. "And you, Mia, they're offering you a scholarship to the Brookdale Academy." Mia's eyes widened. "Brookdale Academy? The private school? But that's for rich kids." "Not just that," Nora said, turning the page. "They're also offering music classes, private lessons, fully paid." Mia blinked, feeling like she had misheard. She glanced at her mother, then at the papers. Her heart pounded in her chest. It didn't make sense. Why would they do this for us? "Mom." Mia's voice trembled. "Why are they doing this?" Nora swallowed hard, her eyes still locked on the paper. "It says it's a reward for compassion. Because of you, Mia?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her breath shaky. "Because of what you did for that man, Eli." Mia's chest tightened. She glanced away, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her. She felt the weight of it pressing down on her. "But I didn't do it for a reward," Mia muttered, her voice tight. "I didn't give him my lunch because I wanted this." Nora placed her hands on Mia's shoulders and knelt in front of her, her tired eyes filled with warmth. "That's exactly why you're getting it," she said softly. "Don't you see, sweetie? People don't always get rewarded for doing the right thing. But sometimes, someone notices." Mia's eyes burned with unshed tears. She threw her arms around her mother, holding on tightly as her emotions spilled out. Relief, gratitude, doubt. "Do you think we should accept it?" Mia whispered into her mother's shoulder. Nora hugged her tighter. "I think," she said, her voice full of quiet strength, "that we've fought for so long just to stay afloat. And maybe it's okay to let someone help us, just this once." Mia nodded, her tears soaking into her mother's sweater. Across the room, the envelope lay open, its contents spread on the counter like pieces of a puzzle. But one thing was clear. Their lives were about to change. The kitchen table had never felt so small. Nora sat on one side, Mia on the other. Between them lay the documents from Anthony Reed, as if the weight of the world was contained in those pages. They had read every word. Twice. "It's a lot of money," Mia said, breaking the silence. She traced her finger along the edge of the paper, her gaze distant. "It could help us. It could help you." Nora nodded, her hands clasped together on the table. "Yeah, it could." Her eyes lingered on the page that listed the grant for her business. "I could finally quit one of my jobs, be home more." Silence filled the room once more. "But," Mia said quietly, her eyes meeting her mother's, "doesn't it feel weird?" Nora tilted her head. "Weird how?" "Like it's a reward for something I wasn't trying to be rewarded for," Mia admitted. "I didn't help Eli so I could get all this." She looked down at the table. "It feels like I'm being paid for something that was supposed to be free." Nora watched her daughter for a long moment, her eyes filled with pride and understanding. She reached across the table and took Mia's hand. "Listen to me, Mia," she said firmly. "You did something good because you have a good heart. No one's taking that away from you. No one's putting a price on it." She squeezed Mia's hand. "But life doesn't always give second chances, honey. And maybe this is ours." Mia swallowed hard, her fingers curling around her mother's. "You really think we should take it?" "I think," Nora said, her voice filled with quiet resolve, "that you've spent too much time thinking you're not enough. This is someone telling you that you are." Mia's eyes burned again, but she didn't look away. Her mother's gaze was steady, her voice unshakable. It felt like every burden they'd carried for the past few years was finally being lifted, just a little. "Okay," Mia whispered. Her voice grew stronger. "Okay." Nora smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she pulled Mia into a hug. "That's my girl." They sat there for a while, holding on to each other, letting the weight of the decision settle into their bones. This was it. A chance at something better. The clock ticked softly on the wall, but this time it didn't feel so loud. The lunchroom was a minefield of noise, laughter, and sharp glances. Mia sat at a table near the back, her eyes fixed on her sandwich, her thoughts still circling around the decision she and her mother had made. She felt it before she saw it. The presence of Zoe Parker. The sharp edge of her voice was as distinct as nails on a chalkboard. "Well, well, look who's here," Zoe sneered as she approached, her friends following behind her like shadows. "Brookdale's new charity case." Mia's heart tightened, but she didn't look up. Not today, she told herself. Not today. "What's it like being the poster girl for street musicians?" Zoe's grin widened. "Did he give you a shiny nickel for your kindness?" Her friend snickered. Mia took a slow breath. Her fingers curled around her sandwich, but this time, she didn't shrink away. Slowly, she lifted her head and met Zoe's gaze, her eyes calm but steady. "Actually," Mia said, her voice stronger than she expected, "he did give me something." Zoe's grin faltered. "Oh yeah? What, a song?" Mia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving Zoe's. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "He showed me that being kind is stronger than being cruel. And I'd do it all over again." The snickers died. Zoe's friends glanced at each other, unsure of how to react. Zoe's smile disappeared, her face hardening. "You think you're better than me, huh?" "No," Mia said, her eyes steady as stone. "I think I'm better than I was yesterday." Silence swept over the table. For once, Zoe didn't have a response. She glared at Mia, her lips twitching, then spun on her heel and walked away. Her friends hesitated, then followed her. Mia sat back down, her heart still racing. She felt eyes on her, students watching, whispering, but she didn't care. Her hands were steady now. She picked up her sandwich, took a bite, and smiled to herself. For the first time, she felt like she was more than enough. The late afternoon sun streamed through the music room windows, casting golden beams onto the polished floor. The faint hum of distant chatter echoed from the school hallways, but inside it was quiet. Just the soft, deliberate notes of a piano filling the air. Mia's fingers glided over the keys, her brows knit in deep concentration. Her eyes weren't on the sheet music. She didn't need it. The melody came from her heart, note by note, soft and steady like a stream cutting through stone. It was a tune she knew well, one she'd heard on a street corner not so long ago. Her fingers danced, and slowly the music grew richer, fuller. The simple tune evolved into something deeper, layered with notes of hope, pain, and quiet triumph. Her eyes fluttered shut as she let herself feel every part of it. "This is my song now," she thought. "Not his, mine." Behind her, someone cleared their throat. Startled, Mia's hands froze on the keys. She glanced over her shoulder to see Mr. Collins standing by the doorway, his arms crossed, a small smile tugging at his face. "Don't stop," he said, stepping into the room. "That was beautiful." Mia felt her cheeks flush. "It's just something I was messing around with," she mumbled, turning back to the piano. "Messing around, huh?" Mr. Collins chuckled as he walked closer. "Sounds like you're doing more than messing around. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I know when someone's playing from their soul." Mia glanced at him, her eyes hesitant. It's just a song I heard once, from someone I met." "Well, you made it your own," Mr. Collins said, sitting on the bench next to her. "It's not easy to do that. Most people just play the notes, but you're telling a story." He tapped a finger to his temple. I can hear it. A soft smile tugged at Mia's lips. She looked down at the keys, brushing her fingers over them lightly. He told me something once, she said, her voice quiet. He said kindness is like music. It plays when no one's watching. Mr. Collins tilted his head, his eyes crinkling with curiosity. Sounds like a wise man. Yeah, Mia said, her gaze distant, lost in the memory of Eli's gentle smile. He was. That evening, Mia walked home under a sky streaked with pink and orange. The air was crisp but not too cold, and the world seemed calmer somehow, like it was taking a breath along with her. She gripped the strap of her backpack tightly, her mind replaying Mr. Collins' words. You're telling a story. She knew now that her story wasn't just about the music. It was about everything. The quiet sacrifices her mom made, the courage it took to stand up to Zoe, and the choice she made to be kind when no one else was. Her footsteps slowed as she reached the familiar street corner where Eli had always played his guitar. Her breath caught in her chest. The corner was empty. No Eli. No soft strumming of his guitar. Only the sound of passing cars and the faint rustle of leaves in the gutter. But something was there. A small note, taped to the weathered brick wall. Mia's heart leapt into her throat. She approached slowly, her fingers trembling as she peeled it off the wall. The paper was creased, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were clear. To Mia, kindness isn't a test. It's the music that plays when no one is watching. Keep playing, kid. Her vision blurred with tears. She pressed the note to her chest, holding it like something precious and fragile. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps, a mixture of laughter and tears. Of course you'd do this, she whispered, her eyes lifting to scan the street. Of course you'd just disappear. But she didn't feel sad. Not anymore. She smiled, letting herself feel the warmth of it. It was like she could still hear him, that soft strumming melody weaving its way through the sounds of the city. Her fingers twitched. The music's mine now, she thought. 2 months later, everything had changed. The small apartment that Mia and her mom had called home for years looked different, not bigger, but brighter. New curtains hung on the windows, and the faint smell of fresh paint lingered in the air. On the kitchen counter sat a small vase of wildflowers, and the table wasn't cluttered with bills anymore. Nora hummed a tune as she flipped through a stack of papers. Business permits, customer invoices, and a flyer for her new cleaning service, Nora's Neat and Tidy. She wore a clean, pressed uniform with her name stitched on the chest. Her eyes had a sparkle of hope in them that Mia hadn't seen in years. Don't forget your music binder, Nora said as she packed Mia's lunch. You've got your lesson after school today, right? Yeah, I know, Mia called from her bedroom. She pulled on her jacket, grabbed her backpack, and glanced at the small photo on her nightstand. A picture of her and her mom, arms around each other, smiling like they'd just won the lottery. Because, in a way, they had. At school, something had shifted. People didn't stare at her the way they used to. There were still whispers. There would always be whispers. But Mia didn't feel small anymore. When she walked into the lunchroom, her steps were steady. She glanced around, noticing Zoe at her usual table with her friends. Zoe's eyes flicked toward her, but this time, Mia didn't look away. She met Zoe's gaze head-on, her eyes steady as stone. Zoe blinked, her smirk faltering. She nudged one of her friends and turned away, muttering something Mia couldn't hear. Mia's lips curled into a small, quiet smile. Yeah, that's what I thought. She sat at her table, unwrapped her sandwich, and pulled out her music binder. Her fingers traced over the pages of notes, her mind humming with a tune she'd been working on for weeks. She thought about showing Mr. Collins at her next lesson, but part of her wanted to keep it for herself. For now, at least. Her gaze drifted to the open binder, where she'd tucked away a small, creased piece of paper, the note from Eli. She glanced at it briefly, her heart warming as she read the words for the 100th time. Kindness isn't a test. It's the music that plays when no one is watching. Her smile grew. You were right, Eli, she thought. It's my song now. That weekend, Mia visited the music store with her mom. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside, the air filled with the faint scent of wood and varnish. Guitars hung on the walls like artwork, and rows of keyboards lined the center aisle. Mia's eyes lit up. She gravitated toward the display of small pianos and keyboards. Her fingers hovered over the keys like they always did, tracing the edges. Go ahead, her mom said from behind her. Play something." Mia glanced back, unsure. "They don't like it when people mess with the displays." "Then let's make sure it's not just a display," Nora said, her voice light but firm. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. "We'll talk to the clerk." Mia's jaw dropped. "Wait, what?" "I've been saving a little from the business," Nora said, smiling proudly. "Call it an investment in your business." Mia stared at her, tears threatening to spill. "Mom, don't cry, baby," Nora said, rubbing her back. "Go pick one. Make it count." Her heart swelled as she walked toward the keyboards, fingers tingling with excitement. She sat down, pressed a key, and let the clear, bright note fill the air. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she played the melody, the one that started with a man on a street corner and ended right here. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of being seen, because this time, she was the one playing the music. Life is full of unexpected twists, paths that may seem meaningless at first, but lead to the most beautiful places. For Mia, it all began with a sandwich and a moment of compassion. She wasn't seeking recognition or rewards, but that small act of kindness set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Kindness isn't a test. It doesn't require approval, nor does it need acknowledgement. It's like music, a melody that plays quietly when no one is listening. Mia learned this, not just from Eli, but from her own actions. She realized that kindness is not a weakness, but a strength that makes us resilient in the face of challenges. From a quiet girl who tried to blend into the background, Mia stepped into the light. She didn't need to shout to prove her worth, because she knew that value had always been there, quietly and steadfastly, just like the last note of a song. Eli may have disappeared, but he never truly left. What he gave Mia wasn't just a note on a piece of paper. It was a precious lesson on trusting the goodness inside herself. And now, Mia wasn't just listening to music. She was creating it. She was writing her own melody, each note a part of the journey she had lived. She no longer feared the judgment of others. She no longer feared Zoe's teasing or anyone else's opinions. Because Mia had found her strength, a strength that no one could take away. On the street corner where Eli once played his guitar, only the sounds of the city and the rush of footsteps remained. But if you listened closely enough, you might still hear a soft melody echoing from somewhere, a gentle reminder. Kindness isn't a test. It's the music that plays when no one is watching. And now, Mia was the one playing that music. With each note she played, she infused it with faith, hope, and courage. One day, someone else would hear it. And they too would begin to make their own music. Because music, like kindness, has a way of touching hearts, even when we don't realize it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey and listening to the entire story. I truly hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found something meaningful in the tale of Mia and Eli, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more stories like this. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Your feedback means the world to me. And of course, feel free to share this with anyone you think might enjoy it too. Thank you again for your support, and I look forward to bringing you more heartwarming stories in the future. Stay kind, stay inspired, and keep playing your own music. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new update.